Good evening, everyone. I'm Daniele. I'm the Chief Operation Officer of Codemotion, and today I'm very happy to welcome all of you to this fourth panel of Building Performing Team. Even today, we have amazing panelists and as well our Master of Ceremony, Pier Giorgio here. Today, the title is Building a Resilient Organization, and so I'm thrilled to see the panel goes on. So guys, for everyone who doesn't know about Codemotion, let me just give you a quick information about us. Codemotion is an online platform for all the activities that goes to support basically the developers and their professional growth. We want to create the largest community of developers, and through our platform, we're gonna organize basically different activities from conferences, webinar, coding challenges, meetup, hackathons, learning paths, and both in the online and offline format. Of course, during COVID situation is mostly online format. And in the platform, there is also a very important section that is dedicated to our tech communities. Each community can have its own space to organize its own meetup, engage their members, and developer can check the calendar of all the events that we are running through the platform and through our communities. We have three biggest online conferences in Europe, very close, 5 weeks to go in October. There will be an online conference focused on Northern Europe. In early November, another online conference focused on Spain, and the last one focused in Italy. So please just check this out on our platform and subscribe to the conference that you are interested to participate on. So going back to our panel, as I said, this is the fourth one of the series of 5 panels that we are organizing in the Building Performance Team topic. And so let me now give the stage to our Master of Ceremony, Pier Giorgio, to introduce our panelists to today's panels. And enjoy.
Hello. Hi, Daniele. Can you unshare the screen so I can share mine? Hi, everybody. Let me share the screen. Can you see it? Yes? No?
Perfectly. Yes.
Awesome. All right. All right. So, hi, everybody. Here we are again. Welcome to the 4th episode of Building Performing Teams, the online appointment for senior leaders in technology, brought to you by Codemotion. And thank you, Daniele, for the introduction. Why are we here today? So the real thing is that engineering leadership is hard. And as leaders, we always want to drive the best performance in our organizations. And this comes with a plethora of responsibilities and challenges, right? From organizing operations to shaping teams and roles, setting goals, and so on and so forth. And this is the 4th stop of our journey, a journey of 5 panels to unravel all these themes. This journey will lead us to the online Codemotion conference in October. And at each panel, I will be your voice. I will try to be your voice and discuss each topic with a pool of proven technology leaders from different sectors of the industry. Let's look at the agenda. Each panel will be roughly 1 hour long, starting with a 30 minutes discussion with the panelists on the selected theme, followed by a Q&A session, where I will pick the most voted questions you will ask via Mentimeter. As you can see at the top of the slide, of the screen that I'm sharing with you, there is a code and there is a URL that is menti.com. This is an interactive panel. So use that link and enter that code to ask the questions that you want to ask to our panelists and interact with us. So we are going to ask you questions to inform the panel that we are going to, yeah, I already see people dialing and liking it. That's good. Awesome. So let's jump into today's theme and topic, which is building resilience org. So let me give you some context first. So Peopleware is way less deterministic than software. And as leaders in technology, we are familiar with concepts and principles for building resilient architectures or resilient systems. But we not often talk about building resilient organizations, and we don't know what are the key aspects of it. So in these sessions, we are going to ask these questions to our experienced guests, and we will unravel this topic. We will hear how our panelists went about improving the resilience in the organization, what indicators and metrics they use to measure such a complex domain, and how these aspects, how resilience affected software development, delivery, and so on and so forth. So without further wait, well, I'm pleased to introduce our fantastic panelists in rigorous infographic order. So please show yourself, turn on the videos. Douglas Talbott, Manuel Pais, and Ruth Penfold. I am extremely pleased to have you here today. So welcome. I would like to start from a brief round of introduction. I can lead from the front here, given that I didn't introduce myself yet. So my name is Pier Giorgio Niero. You can call me PG, it's way simpler. You can find me in London. I'm based in London, or I'm based in Twitter as well. You can find me there as Pigut, P-I-G-I-U-Z. And I am head of engineering at SuperAwesome, where I lead a team of roughly 60 kid tech engineers to make the internet safer for kids. Ruth, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone. I'm Ruth Penfold. I am currently people practice lead at Launchpad, which is a BP company. Yep, that's right. Actual BP, actual big oil and gas BP. We are a new accelerator that BP have cooked up to help really transform the world of energy. So we're building new technology businesses. So my role is to essentially, construct the right leadership teams and support them, and then help them to build environments that they can then hold the right space for people to innovate and thrive against a backdrop of massive scale. Previously, I was with Shazam for 5 years until we sold to Apple. And then I also spent almost 2 years with Onfido. So I know that you've had Kevin Goldsmith, I think, that my former co-worker as well recently. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Great. Manuel, do you want to go next?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me in this great panel, a very interesting topic. So I'm Manuel. I'm one of the co-authors of the book Team Topologies, which of course I had to have here, organizing business and technology teams for fast flow. So I have a background in computer science. I have been in the industry about 20 years, and I've had a number of different roles, starting with development, testing, QA, team lead, etc., and consulting. And so this book that I co-wrote with Matthew Skelton is all about team structures, team interactions. How do we help organizations evolve? And I guess that's why I'm here in this debate.
Great, thank you. Douglas?
Yeah, thanks, Pier Giorgio. My name is Doug Talbott. I guess the intro to me is I started coding in 1990 professionally, and I've been around a while in the software industry. I sort of been a head of software kind of role for about the last 15 years, but most of the last 5 years, I was head of organizational effectiveness at Ocado Technology, and you'll have to look them up if you don't know who they are, but big enterprise scale retail systems. And I guess the common question during that time, all of those years, was how do I create extraordinary teams, team of teams and organizations? And I got obsessed with going out and hunting research on what were practices that actually had evidence behind them that we could bring to the workplace. And met PG while I was at Ocado, and we started talking about that a lot. And I explained that I developed a bit of an organizational dynamics model that helps provide leaders with ways to look at the complexity of putting their organization together, and supports them with designing interventions that are evidence-backed. So about a year ago, I co-founded a consultancy called The Adjacent to help leaders draw on the best of information that's out there, from queuing theory and complexity theory to sociology and psychology, and bring that into organizations well past tech. So that's me.
Awesome. Awesome. I have the best panel today. Let's get into it. So
oh, come on, PG. We bet you say that to all the panelists.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not supposed to say that. So, look, we started talking about resilience. One of the premises that I said was like, we are well accustomed to the concept of resilient systems that recover fast from failure. But not as much to the concept of resilient organizations that react well to, when stretched or to failure in general. One of the things that I would like to do is I would like to ask the audience first, how do you go about measuring resilience? So remember, this is an interactive panel. So we listed here a bunch of measurements, and I would like to get your input, from the audience about what do you think, measures it at best. And I would ask the same or a similar question to our panel, actually. So what indicators should a leader consider to get the sense of how resilient their organization is? And how also does organizational resilience stand and compete with the other priorities that the leader has? Manuel, do you want to take a stab at this?
Sure. So we were just talking actually just before the debate started about what is the definition of organizational resilience, right? I guess that would be the place to start. Personally, I find the term organizational resilience is a little bit negative, perhaps. Kind of makes us think that something bad, some failure happened, and so we have to recover. But hopefully, what we have is, in the first place, is a responsive organization. So I quite like that term of organization that is able to respond quickly, both to problems, but also to changes in what the market's asking, what competitors are offering, what their users want. And so there's actually a manifesto, responsive.org, which is interesting. It was basically this idea of being able to quickly learn and respond to what we are seeing externally in the market and in competitors and customers, and also internally. So we are addressing the problems that we have internally in the organization. And so I kind of think of more of responsive organizations rather than resiliency. I think you get resiliency if you are a responsive organization. So effectively, we're talking about being able to deliver and to have fast flow of delivery of value to our customers, and also very quick feedback from problems and experiments that we run, and we get feedback from our services and from our customers to integrate that very quickly in the next versions of our services, offerings, etc. So that's kind of my definition. In terms of indicators, I think the key indicator is always sustainable revenue, right? That might be seem a little bit simplistic, but if you're able to sustain revenue, where you're actually, to do that in today's world, you need to be able to learn and adapt, right? You can't just have a static model of revenue and expect that to last forever. And so that's one part, and the other part is satisfaction of our customers. That's a kind of another basic thing. If we are able to engage our customers and keep them satisfied, not just with our products, but also the service we provide, and the promises that we make as a brand to our customers. So those two, and also employee satisfaction, which is quite interesting, that if you have employee satisfaction high, that means obviously people are engaged. For many organizations, this is actually quite a bit of a problem. And so what leaders need to do, from my perspective, to get to this kind of responsive organization that does well on revenue, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, is to move away from, over focusing too much on controlling costs and controlling processes, and get teams to be, more autonomous. We know what are the motivators for individuals around autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So that has been something we don't need to discover. We know what gets people engaged, what gets people to do their best. So if we can align teams and get them close to the revenue impact and the customer impact, so they're not kind of 4, 5, 10 levels away from seeing what is the impact of their work on the revenue and customers. If we get that, and then we get the employee engagement high by providing intrinsic motivators, then that's basically it. Obviously, it's not a quick thing, but that's kind of the core that I think leaders should be looking at. And then, basically get out of the way of the teams. Just, support them in this way and align them to your actual value streams. And then, basically get out of the way, or focus on what are the problems across teams and across boundaries, how to reduce dependencies between teams, how can we accelerate our teams, and so on. So another indicators interesting at the team level are, for example, the metrics from the Accelerate book. So mean time to respond, lead time. Obviously, you need to be able to quickly get changes out from a technical and business point of view. And so that's also useful indicators at the team level, not for performance reviews or comparing teams, but for each team to have their own kind of goals in terms of, we want to, be able to go faster, make more experiments, and respond quickly, faster to problems. So that's kind of my answer, my first answer.
Yeah, I think there was so much good stuff in there. I totally agree with loads of that, particularly around proximity. People's proximity to what they're doing is so important. I think the part, and there are brilliant ways of measuring in quite a specific way, whether we're looking at, ENPS or, retention, or, revenue, that all important other R, revenue, as you were saying, Manuel. I think for me, though, we're in this sort of incredible moment in time where I'm going to assume most of us in this audience are in tech businesses, and probably a lot of us are working from home right now. And yes, in the people sense, we've developed all these means of trying to measure how resilient and how satisfied and how much a team is thriving. But I think the moment of time that we're in, we're seeing a bit of a rise. We're flipping back the other way slightly in a rise of humanity and empathy for one another, right? So if we to say, how should a leader have a sense of how resilient their organization is, it's by proximity to other humans, I would say, not in the physical sense, but there are other ways. So how connected in is that leader? Now that can be the leader at the top of the food chain. I don't mean the whole organization. I'm not suggesting one-to-ones to kill it death by one-to-one all week, but leading from a place of love, building genuine relationships with the people who are your direct reports so that you understand where they are and how they are working on their own resilience within themselves so that they can support resilience in one another. And I think when you're close enough to people, you can see, are they thriving? Are they exceeding expectations? Because I don't know about you all, but what I found from an EMPS is sometimes that score is fine. And that's great because culturally, people don't necessarily say bad things about the organization that they're in sometimes. So sometimes it's actually getting closer to the human beings within it and going, actually, I can see that this isn't right. And perhaps if we reconfigure some bits and pieces over here, we can set things up in a way that means that you're going to thrive. And if I'm to say how I want my leaders to prioritize that work, for me, it has to be the top of the to-do list. So, you know, it is up to us as leaders to make sure that our team have what they need to be successful. And if they don't have it, even if that means that many of them are sort of self-serving and developing, you know, and working very independently and very autonomously, it's our role to make sure that they're set up to succeed and that they have what they need to be able to develop within their roles, within themselves, and really have that all-important mental elasticity, flexibility that means that they become more change resilient and that they can cope with the different demands as an organization starts to scale.
Should I jump in here? I guess I have a slightly different perspective to throw in here. And I think that when we start talking about organizational resilience, I think we all now admit that one of the key meta pressures across our entire organization, whether we're looking at revenue or efficiency or productivity or employee engagement and happiness, is this idea of, are we going to exist as an organization in the future? How well are we dealing with the change of the marketplace around us, and how well are we dealing with the change internally, and how well are we disrupting ourselves? And I think that that we then have to look for what's a measure that's going to identify our record in dealing with those changes. And we almost need to then go back into our data archives and think about, when did we need to adapt to some form of change? Was it we needed to adapt to leadership change, someone leaving? Was it that we needed to bring in more teams? How well did we do that? Sort of people kind of focused things. Did we need to actually identify and build a set of values and a culture because we hadn't been focusing on enough when we were a startup? Or are we dealing with changes to our marketplace? Are we needing to add more features to our product? Or are we dealing with change to what makes us efficient, and we're struggling now to put things out for the right price? So looking for all those kinds of changes and then figuring out how fast we responded, for me, is the measure of whether or not we were actually any good at it and whether or not we're getting better at it. So if we asked ourselves, when was the last time that people recommended shifting people between teams, and how long did it take for our leadership to act on that and shift people between teams? When was the last time we needed to add another team to get an expedite feature out, and how quickly were we able to put that team together and fire it up and get that feature out? Or how quickly were we able to double in size if that was the pressure? And COVID's obviously the most recent one, was how quickly were we able to go remote? But I think the problem there was, though it was an unfair measure of how quickly we went remote because it was an emergency one and suddenly it got high priority. I think the real measure is how well did we do that when we weren't under emergency pressure? And that, for me, is the key to a really resilient organization, is one that can both not just be reactive to pressure, but also proactive. And how fast can it do any change to any system within inside its organization?
I love that. I would just like to add very quickly. I think that's all key. And also, do we actually use the sense for problems internally in the organization to detect them and then be able to evolve and respond? You know, things like, if we're supposed to be providing a service to other teams and they don't really use it or understand it, or if we're collaborating but we didn't get the outcome that we were expecting, or we didn't define the outcome, are we kind of aware, self-aware, if you like, as an organization, that we need to act on those things and not just let them become, problems that happened and we didn't take advantage to evolve and improve the organization.
Yeah, I think a key measure of that, Manuel, is how fast do we pick up on those things? Because often what I find is that all of those ideas are going through every employee's head, but we're not pulling them out. We're not asking for them, and almost people are almost scared to mention them in some organizations. Right. Yeah, and then so the question is, how quickly are we able to grab those out of people's heads when they're having them, and then how quickly can we act on them? And I think that is probably the key measure of, are we a resilient organization?
Yeah, I love what you just said about how quickly an organization reacts to change. Reacts and also proactively changes. Sometimes we talk about resilience in a way that is like, reacting to failure, reacting to something negative, but we also have to build it somehow. We have to, you turn on the light. Thanks. I see plenty of questions. We are going to tackle the questions later in the second part of the panel and the second part of the session. One of the things that we want to remember to the audience is to remind to the audience, that's English, is don't use the Q&A tool in Zoom, but browse to menti.com and file your question there so that the others can vote it and we can pick it up. All right, it's time for the second question of this panel. So we talked about how to measure an organizational resilience. Well, the organizational resilience. Let's zoom in into the people of an organization. So the question that I would ask to the audience is, drum roll, how much should a company be involved in building employees' personal resilience? And I would say this ties in very nicely with what Ruth was mentioning earlier. So I would love to hear your input here. So is it correct to assume that resilient organizations are made of resilient people? And how should we cultivate resilience in each individual over an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, to the first part, resilient organizations being made of resilient people, absolutely. I like to sort of, look at an organization as this kind of symbiotic thing, right? Where actually you kind of need, you need an organization that develops its sort of co-flexibility with one another so that one part of it can be strong if another is weak, and that you kind of develop this wonderful energy between the different people and the different teams within it. So yes, a resilient org is made of resilient people, but building resilience in human beings comes from the inside out. So a human being has to be master of their own destiny when it comes to their own mental wellness. I say that to say, though, my view is the role of the organization, therefore, is to make sure that each human being has the opportunity to be inspired and to start to develop their internal toolkit. So the role at an organizational level, therefore, is supporting people to figure out what their own roadmap is to thrive in their lives. So at Launchpad, we've done that, and in my roles before, we've done that in a few different ways. One of the first things that we did when lockdown was imposed on us all was to fast track something that we'd been planning to do, which was just make sure that coaching was available to people so that they had that kind of time, space, and whatever. But then what we've also been doing and working on is hosting sessions from different subject matter experts around how people rest, what they eat, but not in just the kind of boring, not boring, but not in the more traditional nutrition. This is bad for you. This is good for you. More, how do you listen to your body and develop your relationship with food so that you're using food in the right way? And what's the psychology of food? And there's a difference, right? Rather than this is what you should eat. This is how you connect to yourself sufficiently to learn the best way to eat for you that works for you. This is how you might develop tools like meditation and all of those good things. We ran a session in the last 2 weeks on, you know, dealing with pain in your body, you know, the insidious pain that we all live with day to day, how you tackle that. Sounds crazy. How to sit properly in your chair and set up your workstation, but in a way where you're actually connecting into your body and feeling what it feels like, rather than just the textbook says I should do it like this. So actually helping people to learn their own way to thrive in their environment, whatever that means. And I think people can be at different, like if we view resilience like a spectrum, right? But it's also a movable feast. And I can say as a woman with total pride that my resilience throughout the month can change. And so I need, you know, and with that means I know what I need to do to make sure that I'm thriving throughout. And, you know, we have a very honest platform within the organization where, you know, it's okay for people to be pretty straightforward with where they are. Not necessarily on a personal level. I realized that sounded way worse after I said it. So yeah, bringing it back though, I think that how people live, how they develop their own blueprint for success is important. Attitude is infectious, both positively and negatively. So if you're looking at how you develop an organization that's going to become resilient, you know, there are things that you can look for when you're interviewing to stand a better chance. I think the sorts of things that I would be looking for, really though, there isn't like a resilience measure. For me, it's more something of mindset, right? So what I'm looking for is, how do people frame the challenges that they faced in their life? How much responsibility do they take for whatever has happened in their life? Do they default to a victim place, or are they like, actually, this thing happened and it went wrong, but this is what I did about it, and this is what I've learned since. And I've just read this book on blah, blah, blah. Like that kind of person, that's someone who's building their own resilience. That's someone who's growing in their life. That's someone that's going to help in this landscape of change all the time that we're living in right now. That's the kind of person that's going to be a really positive addition to that symbiotic ecosystem that I'm talking about, right? So how honest they are with themselves, that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at. But before I throw it out to the others, there's one more thing that I would say, and that is that it can also be toxicity in a culture of resilience. So this idea of needing to be strong no matter what, and you know, if you've over-indexed on that as an organization, and people feel like they have to be okay and they have to do these things, when actually at the moment we need to give people the space not to be okay sometimes, right? And we need to do that all the time. But this year we've all just realized quite how important it really is. So we want them to be as real and authentic as they possibly can be. So we as leaders, we have to show up being as real and authentic as we can possibly be to support that in other people. So yeah, like there is a danger, there is a dark side to this sort of like, I'm always okay, I'm resilient, I can handle anything. You know, you have to be able to spot those cracks.
I would say perhaps, and if you agree, perhaps more than resilient, we need people to feel safe, because I'm thinking yes. Everything we talked about in the previous question, of being able to identify problems, react to them, respond to them. I think you mentioned that, Douglas. If you don't have, or both of you, if you don't have a culture where you promote people to speak up and be safe, that this is not going to have any negative consequence. So if you need a kind of culture in the organization that promotes people to feel safe, and obviously then inside each team you need also to the leaders and to promote that people feel safe, and like you were saying, Ruth, that people have the space to deal with whatever is going on in their lives, and so if people are not familiar, I recommend having a look at the Western model, which I find very interesting, where based on research, which is actually not focused on technology, it was in the health industry, I believe. And he kind of classified organizations from pathological, which are more kind of power-oriented, command and control, to generative organizations that actually encourage people experiment. You know, when there are failures, those lead to inquiry. So you need that kind of background, that kind of setup for then individuals to be able to be resilient and respond and be able to react to problems and changes. Is they need to have that kind of backdrop of they feel safe to talk about it and to express and when there are problems, and not have fear of hierarchy and all those things. So the other couple of things I wanted to say here on this topic, you know, I think this talks to what you were saying, Ruth, of this kind of symbiotic approach between, you know, people and structures and organization, because what I've seen is that if you have an organization that's very static, that doesn't really evolve their team structures and doesn't adapt to the needs of the market and the internal needs, then people also in that organization tend to get static and not have the kind of resilience and evolution and adaptation that you would like them to have. So people can become resilient even almost in the wrong way. When I see many organizations that instead of evolving, they do this big bang reorganization now, you know, because now there's agile, or now there's DevOps or digital transformation, and they think that means let's change all our, you know, structures, let's change roles, let's move people around. That's actually tends to be negative, because people interpret that and they see that, okay, there were some changes, there were some benefits, but it was kind of this big bang impactful change that, you know, perhaps now I'm working with, I was moved and I don't work anymore with people that I like to collaborate, that I had trust and built a relationship, or for whatever reason, people become resilient to change, if you like, in a bad way. And so organizations often or sometimes fail to understand this, that if you have an ongoing kind of evolution that is attacking the needs that you see on the day-to-day basis, that helps people feel like, okay, we are part of this resilient organization or responsive that evolves according to the needs, not based on hype or based on, you know, some big keywords that now for some reason we have to implement, even though we don't really know what that means.
Sure. I think that what you're mentioning, Manuel, is a lot of systems that affect the way people can become resilient, or if they are already resilient, can even affect them in a negative way and take away from resilience. So I think there's that symbiotic relationship, or maybe the relationship between people and the organizational systems is really key here. And I think we can have a resilient organization, one that is good at adapting, allows for safe spaces to keep on thinking about how can we change and how can we change to be better, and always looking at itself, is going to end up with a natural space for people to be able to be more resilient and be more psychologically safe and be more mentally in a great place. But I think that we see very, very commonly that even when we have very resilient people, that kind of attribute of those people can be knocked out of them by a toxic organization, maybe a big organization that says it wants people to innovate, but then slaps them on the back of the wrist when their experiment fails, or says that they want people to bring up new ideas, but then never listens to them. Those things take away from our resilience and as an individual. And so there is this real kind of constant tug of war between the individual trying to be the best resilient person they can be and what the organization is naturally affecting them with. And I think those of you who've read any Edward Deming, he talks about 90% of the outcomes of the system is in the system itself. And I think that some of our organizations have got so much inertia and presence that they can bash resilience out of people and bash mental health out of people and not be healthy places to be. And in that kind of place, I imagine it would be very, very hard to be resilient. Have you got any ideas for what people should do in that kind of space, Ruth, if they're finding themselves in that?
What, when they find themselves in a toxic environment like that?
Yeah, because obviously you're talking about people defending themselves by building their own resilience capabilities, but it must be tough when you're in that fight.
Yeah. Honestly, like, so a few years ago, people used to really worry about. So, I mean, I've been working in the people space for 20 years, right?
Yeah,
and 20 years ago, people used to really worry about leaving jobs and what that was going to look like on their CV and ridiculous things like that. And in those days, it did matter. But these days, I'm happy to say, really the best thing of all that anybody can do is take themselves out of that situation. I often say to people, make sure that you have the right, I like to call them, in my case, maybe a chamber of war. But anyway, your crew, like your own executive team, your group of advisors, right? You need those people around you who can tell you sometimes when you're in a situation that's abusive, because sometimes you don't even realize it. Sometimes you just start to lose yourself and shrink away. And this can be personally and professionally, right? So it's almost like you need people that can hold up a mirror to you sometimes and go, do you know what? This isn't right. You know, the hours that you're working, what you're being asked to do, this isn't right. Hopefully, though, once you've walked the path of developing the connection with yourself, you will be able to see when something isn't right. And you'll be able to call out abuse for what it is. And even if you don't have the power within your organization to call it out and perhaps do anything to change it there is such power in just walking away. You have to choose where the best place to spend your energy is. And I would say in most cases, that energy is best spent within yourself, taking yourself forward to the next thing that's going to be awesome for you. Sometimes it's worth investing the energy where you are and seeing whether you can unpick some of that toxicity. Sometimes it is, but you have to be pretty sure of what you have within your own resources to be able to do that and really face that. And frankly, it's not your responsibility to do so. Your responsibility, first and foremost, is to put yourself in the right environment where you can thrive. Somebody once gave me this wonderful kind of thing, and it may or may not be true because I haven't Googled it. So all of you clever technical people listening, like tenfold, that's not true. But the idea of a tumbleweed that rolls through the desert, dry as a bone, and then lands in the right environment, has a little drink, and then starts to grow again, right? So I like to think of human beings like that. Just because you've been a tumbleweed at some time doesn't mean you're not going to start growing somewhere else. So, you know, and for me, as someone who makes decisions about hiring people pretty much every day, and I bet you all do too, I don't care if someone hasn't been successful somewhere else, because I understand that some environments create tumbleweeds and some environments create, you know, incredible new growing plants, right? So, you know, I think that people should feel safe in the sense that the rest of this community has you, even if this organization doesn't. And we are always open to giving opportunities to people who haven't thrived somewhere else. I'm not looking at what you've done before to tell me how good you're going to be in future. What I care about is who you are, what your mindset is, how you've learned from the things that you faced in your life, and whether you want to grow. That's what I care more about. So yeah, change it. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. I am sorry to stop it here, but I have to change the question. Otherwise, this panel will last for days. So, and thanks to everybody who voted, because your votes are really giving us a lot of insights. And I also noticed that depending on who was talking, who had the words, the votes were kind of, rooting for one of you at a time. All right, so let's jump into this. Practices and strategies, tactics, so tangible things. What can we do in order to help building organizational resilience? And I would like actually to start from Doug here. So how can a leader go about building resilience into their organization? And is there also, earlier you said that well, an organization can grow, but it also can shrink. Is there any commonality on the practices, between the practices that one can put in place in these two cases?
Yeah, so I think, of course, you need your CEO and your top leaders to be resilient thinking people. Or let's expand the word resilient, because I think it biases the thought process, but people who want their organization to be change adaptive to the fourth industrial revolution or to VUCA or to the kind of uncertain world we live in. They want the most amazingly good organization at being able to manage change and thrive as it goes on as well. So you need someone with that kind of mindset to actually start driving things. But then that person's job is to try and create the environment that gives all of the employees the right space to be psychologically safe, to not feel they're in a toxic space, to take the wrong attitude to resilience, to take an attitude of I can experiment, I am safe to fail, and that means that CEO and leader needs to really think about the systems that they set up in their organization. And one of the things I regularly see is leadership who don't understand the consequences of, say, the HR policies that they've got instituted in their organizations, or the incentivization they've got in their organization. They might incentivize sales guys to drive huge amounts of demand onto the engineering team, and then incentivize the engineering team on very high quality. And now they've set up competing incentives inside the organization. And it's got nothing to do with the localized resilience of the individual. Now it's the systems that the high-level leaders have set up are actually creating friction. They're creating an unsafe space to fail because you're going to get hated by one person and liked by another. And what we're really looking for is to minimize friction across all the parts of an organization and to allow for great alignment across all the organization. And I generally like to say that the leadership has to make sure that the systems that are and the policies and the constraints of the organization they've built are aligned with their vision and their commitments to their stakeholders and customers. And then we've got to check that the practices that are going on at the coalface, and go out and walk the floor and see those things in action and check that those are aligned with those systems and that those are aligned with that communication and that vision. And if any one of those pieces is not connected to the other carefully, then you're creating a slightly dangerous space, and everyone in your organization will know it, and they will be reacting to it, and they will instinctively go, oh, I don't want to bring that up in this meeting, or I want to avoid mentioning the unmentionable topic, or don't recommend something in front of that hippo because they'll squash my idea. And the moment that friction starts to happen, everyone will close in and their resilience will go away and your organization's ability to adapt will go away. So the key thing for a leader is to look for, have I got the leadership of the way I lead my product, my sales, my HR, my finance, my efficiency, and engineering all aligned? And are the systems that I put in place contradictory in any way? And what we generally see is the systems are regularly contradictory to the message that's coming out of the mouth of the CEO. And yet no one's made that change. And that to me is an indication that if the organization wasn't able to change to the words of the CEO, then that organization is not resilient and is not going to adapt.
So if I may add, so I'm slightly biased here because obviously I wrote the book Team Topologies, but co-wrote the book. For me, the parts of the organization that can actually deliver value are the teams, right? That's kind of the smallest unit you can have. And so what I see, and I think this is in line with what Douglas is saying, that HR and finance and many parts of the organization are focused only on the individuals. We're looking at individual performance review, we're looking at individual training, all these things are looking at individual, and we're not thinking about the team. What does the team need? And who can answer that the best is the team themselves, right? So again, going back to the initial discussion, if we allow the teams to be aligned with value and we give them the autonomy that they need to have a direct impact on the bottom line, then whatever the practices you need to get that in place and whatever changes you need to HR systems, processes, and across the organization, to focus on the team and allowing the teams to decide as much as possible what they need to evolve to get better and perform better. That's kind of where I come from, and so what we see today is very different from that. Is always I don't know any kind of HR system software that actually puts team first as a kind of a key concept. It's always the individual, and so that's what I would say. And of course, all the psychological safety and the things we talked about earlier. How can you improve that? Whatever practices help and approaches help to get your teams to feel like they have that safe space to learn and to fail sometimes and to evolve. The other thing I wanted to mention quickly is the size of the structure of organization. There are teams, and then of course there are, how do you group teams and what kind of other structures do you have in place? And so one thing to keep in mind is that trust is not the same across all sizes of groups. So when an individual is part of a team, the trust level that you expect is very high inside the team. But then when you are thinking about this person inside a group of 100 people, then the trust they have between them is different. And so there is a lot of research done by Robin Dunbar. So you might have heard of Dunbar's number. It's actually a set of numbers that help us identify different boundaries when we need to kind of think, okay, we're going beyond this boundary of 50 people inside this organizational structure. We shouldn't just keep growing it. We need to think about how do we promote trust within people who are in groups of different sizes. So not just at the team level, kind of what is the right size limit on team size, but also when you go into kind of teams of teams and whatever structures you have, we need to keep this trust boundaries in mind. So that's the other thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and just to pick up on something that Douglas was talking about, when it, an absolutely +1 on a kind of psychological safety standpoint here. I think, as I was saying earlier, talking about people building their own toolkit within themselves, this has to start from the leaders, right? So it's all about the integrity with which a leader shows up within themselves and the degree of honesty that they're prepared to have with themselves first, and how they operate, and how much they are bringing their whole selves and operating in an authentic way that provides the platform for other people to develop and work on that within the team. But yeah, we have to figure this out within ourselves to support the connection with others and then our collective evolution together. And you have to make sure that integrity is not lost as the business grows. So, if you're a founder that's founding a business and you've operated in a certain way, you have to be flexible to allow the story of your organization to evolve as it grows. But where you have to be a bit tighter is the integrity with which your organization is operating. And there is a way to maintain that as you scale, but it takes a bit of extra work, just like maintaining your own integrity takes work and commitment. And, and that's really, really important. And the other part that I would just add is it's also how you support people stepping into leadership roles for the first time. So, making sure that they build the right toolkit within themselves and that you're not just shoving people under them in an organization and hoping that they're going to all figure it out together. Some people are like, oh, exciting, let me get some books and read about it and learn. Other people are like, what do I do now? What do I do with this thing now? So, making sure that they learn how to support the evolution and development of others, especially from afar. We're not all in the rooms with each other anymore. So the way that we're working right now does take a different level of commitment and integrity to make sure that you operate in the right way.
I'd love to plus one that it's so essential that we now treat people who are stepping into any kind of staff management role, or any role actually where they have influence in the hierarchy, whether it's a staff management role or just an influencer role. We need to make sure that they get educated in how to be a leader. And I think that we almost need, particularly in the engineering community, we need to make sure that people recognize they're starting on a new career path, that they may have 10 years as a senior developer and huge amounts of knowledge about architecture and stuff. But now you need to do your next degree, but you need to do your next degree in almost psychology, sociology, anthropology, and stuff like that. And you need to understand how people need to interact together. And Manuel, your book on different team structures, and you introduce a lot of those kind of psychology concepts in the early parts of the book, and I think it's really valuable. Anyone should read that book to get an idea of many pieces that there are to that puzzle, because if you're stepping into one of those roles as a leader, you've just taken on a much more complex puzzle than coding. You're now dealing with human beings, and we have huge complexity about us, and it changes every day. And if you can't manage that, you should be choosing to stay as an individual contributor, or looking at whether or not this is really the career path for you. And we don't do that well enough in our organizations. Absolutely.
I think even just having the right lexicon to talk about some of the problems that you have when you're talking about interactions between teams, and also inside the teams, I totally agree. It's almost like, think about yourself as if you're starting over in a new career. Obviously, the technical knowledge is going to help, especially when you understand the connection between organizational structures and the kind of software architecture. So something called Conway's law. So you understand that we are talking now about social technical systems, right? So this complex world, VUCA, that means part of that is because the world evolves very quickly and the systems are very complex. So you need to understand what is the implication of the organizational side and the structure side on the kind of actual systems that you can produce, and that to make them resilient as well.
Yeah, when I was at Ocado, we actually deliberately started naming all influencers and managers as organizational engineers. And we said, this is a new career path for you. And because we needed to make it explicit to get people to want to take it on. And it meant that they now had a syllabus to focus on. And it's hugely important. And it's been very, very badly done, I think, across all industries. So.
Fantastic. I just want to add one more thing to this, given that we briefly touched on it, but we didn't expand on it too much. To the point about authenticity and being authentic with your employees. So this year is being a tremendously hard year for many, and we usually talk about resilience and then stretching a company and organization while it grows. But many companies this year actually went the other way.
Right.
And at Super Awesome, I was lucky that we were lucky that we are expanding, we are hiring, we are growing. And I kept doing interviews with many candidates, and I heard many bad stories of people being laid off and treated as numbers, and really bad stories. So one of the things that I think we should do as leaders is being authentic with people when they are laid off, when they are furloughed, when they are in their weakest moment.
Yes.
Okay, this is a Zoom applause. Okay,
if I agree, I'm like, oh yeah.
All right. Yeah, the reason is that if you really want to be authentic, you have to be authentic, all over. I mean, not just when things are right.
Agree.
And I don't think it takes much of those kinds of signals for people to start reading the intent of their leadership differently, for the people who stayed even, and they're going to now not trust openness and psychological safety and the space to be a resilient organization as much. So you probably just shot your own organization in the foot by not being authentic, right? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think being, having empathy and being honest is our keys, and we, at all levels, unfortunately, we see when that's lacking, then the kind of harm that can do, not just in companies, but also politically. So, yeah.
All right. I see we already have questions, so I would jump to those. Q&A time. Ooh. All right. There is something specifically for Ruth. Proximity to other people. Is that the statement on decision chain length? And if so, is that for you about depth of hierarchy or more of a network around an individual?
Oh, definitely the network around. So, I mean, what we've built at Launchpad is an organization that doesn't have a ton of hierarchy, quite deliberately. We're developing a different way of doing things. It's not new in that other businesses are doing it, have done it before, but it's about really giving the, for me, I know we've talked a lot about leading others here, and we've touched upon just being a leader, but really for the whole organization at Launchpad, what we've been working on leadership is leadership skills for everybody, so that everybody can, when COVID happened, we rolled out something called the Performance and Growth Framework, which is like a review framework basically, but what it means is that anybody could be your performance coach and you can choose who that is. And so therefore we did having coaching conversations, training with everybody, so that everybody is learning how to hold space for one another to help them address whatever challenges they might be having. So actually, to develop an organization that has love as its foundation, yes, the L word, love, which means that we care enough about one another to give feedback well in a way that supports the other person and supports the growth of the organization that we're in, and that we know one another well enough to be able to go, okay, I could see that person, even on a video, I can see they're not okay today. And then even if it's on Slack, are you okay today? Do you want to grab a few minutes on a voice call walking, not on another video call, so you can talk to me about whatever it is, or whatever works for you, right? And learning how one another like to be communicated with, all those sorts of things, the way that we can then, because people kind of put this great big divide between this is the work me and this is the home me. They're all relationships, right? And if you're in relationship with another person, no matter what it is, work or otherwise, we're having a relationship. So we actually need to choose to invest in one another if we're going to thrive together, however long that is for. So it's encouraging that from the whole organization. That's where I'm at. Not this kind of, not about any specific hierarchy or sort of control in that way. It's encouraging people to be proximate in the community sense, because as I was saying, our individual evolution supports our collective evolution, and our goal should actually only ever be how we come together better rather than how we run away further.
All right. Given that this question was for Ruth specifically, I would mark it as answered and proceed. You see, this is different, right? So system dynamics perspective, resilience can be seen as the rate of effective mutation of the system, i.e. versus stagnant inflexible system. Thoughts on measuring mutation in an org? Who wants to have a stab at that?
I'll go in first. I think that resilience has always got, for every organization, they're going to have to take a choice of a continuum between resilience and robustness, and kind of robustness being efficiency and stability and maybe some elements of quality and things like that. And I think that it's not going to be the greatest organization maybe unless it's a quick garage startup that is 100% all about quick, where's the next change? Quick, where's the next change? And there's going to be different parts of your organization, particularly if you're like thinking about Simon Wardley's evolutionary stages of, pioneer, settler, town planner, and wanting different people for different stages of the life cycle of your products and services. then some bits might be wanting to be more robust and some bits might be wanting to be more adaptable, let's use, rather than resilient. But we still got to create a resilient human framework to surround all of that. So I'm not sure that rate of change is instantly the answer to all organizational problems. We're not looking for lots of mutation and then grabbing out the effective ones like we might have in an evolutionary ecology, where we're actually going to pick a place on the continuum and go, we want to be able to adapt to our environment, hopefully a little bit faster than the rest of the market, so that we're a leading competitor in that space. But human beings are not genes and DNA, and they're going to struggle if you crank up the change rate to 1 million. People are not going to like that in general. And so that's my thoughts on mutation.
Yeah, I agree. I would say you need to mutate when you detect a problem, even at the organizational level. And so perhaps it's not so much about measuring, but making sure we can detect the issues and detect when we need to mutate. And so to do that, one of the things we need is more clarity on, for example, obviously the purpose for different teams. What do we expect from different teams in terms of behaviors and outcomes? So we actually talk a lot about that, types of teams, their responsibilities, their behaviors, and then the other part, because teams are related to each other, is the interactions between them. So like I said, once we have more clarity on what are the types of teams, what are the kinds of interactions that we are expecting to have and why, then we can detect when those go wrong. And it's fine to go wrong, because for whatever reason, we thought we needed to collaborate on this piece of software. It turns out that we don't need to, or whatever it is. It allows us to think about, especially for leaders, to have a common way of thinking about the organizational structures and the system in a much more intentional way, and understand, well, actually, some teams lack some capabilities, what we need to do about it, or these interactions went wrong, what can we learn for that, and then so that we can improve in the future. So being aware, kind of almost like, having this sensory ability to detect when we need to mutate is the key from my perspective.
Right. Ruth, do you want to add something here?
I think the guys answered that very well, but a great use of the word mutation, great and alarming word mutation. I was like, did what now?
Yeah, I have one thing that I mean, I don't know how it will land, but I mean, if measuring mutation in an organization is not just looking at how the roles will evolve and how the number of headcounts and that type of things, but it's also the way that I approach this is also looking at who is in the specific role, and think about that as the amount of diversity that we have in the company. We might not look at how many people. We might not look at that in. I'm rambling. Wait a sec. What I want to say is we might not see a problem that we want to react to because we don't have enough cognitive dissonance in the same organization. So we might end up always with the same type of solution, always to the same, and the solution might be, okay, well, how many engineering managers do we have? How many direct reports do we have? Blah, 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 without looking at the qualitative aspect of the org chart. So my answer to this question is, don't look just at the org chart. Mutation is not just a chart. It's like a three-dimensional thing. It's a polyhedric thing. Yeah, that was my 2 cents. And I will mark it as answered. Next up is something I've been experimenting with recently is chaos engineering on organizational systems, but conscious of more serious damage potential that mere service outage. Seeing anything like this?
I'm assuming that if we're talking kind of Chaos Monkey in action or the Simian Army kind of stuff, then doing that to an organization sounds pretty scary, very, very brave. If you have an incredibly resilient organization, maybe it would work. It could be very, very interesting to create random evolutions. But most people, I'm expecting most people would struggle with that unless you've got the real pioneers who love failure and change constantly in their lives. And doing like chaos engineering on people's performance management or incentivization or pay or would be very bad. So so I guess it depends where you're talking about the chaos engineering.
Yeah, and with people systems, sorry, I was just going to say with people systems, yes, we like to be iterative in the way we do, in a very gentle way, gentle way, because as you're saying, you have to remember the hierarchy of needs. The baseline has got to be good, otherwise the human beings ain't going to be there full stop. And then you don't get into all of this, these other layers of the triangle that we're talking about now. So yeah, you've got to be careful how much you interrupt with, mess about with the baseline. Sorry, Manuel.
No problem. Yeah, I think it depends what exactly is the experiment. I would like to hear more because it sounds interesting, at least.
Definitely radical.
I was kind of thinking, actually, you could do some things that would make some sense. For example, if you are trying to identify a single point of failure in the organization, in the sense of, let's say we have someone who is an expert on some domain, but we think we know enough about the domain, so we're not. This person is not a bottleneck. Let's experiment. Let's try and say, okay, you go on holidays for 2 weeks in the middle of a critical project, and let's see if we really have the needed capabilities in the rest of the organization. That could be.
I quite like that one.
Basically, that could be interesting. The other way I interpret this could be also, I think what you were saying, Ruth, earlier, trying to have an organization that has less hierarchy. For many people, that sounds like chaos. So if you say, well, we only have CEO, C-level, and that's it. And then we have teams. For some people, that's like very scary, sounds chaotic, but can actually, obviously, if done in a constructive way and you know what you're doing.
So think very carefully about your experiments. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting question.
All right, let's see what's next.
I'm just going to turn my light on.
How did you help your team coping with Zoom fatigue?
So really, it's giving people the permission to say no. But again, you got to do it from the leadership level down. So, at first everybody was like, okay, the energy of, oh my goodness, we're all suddenly working from home. How are we doing this? How are we going to keep doing this thing? So people were like hyper alert anyway, probably buoyed up on anxiety more than anything else. And then when the Zoom fatigue set in and we kind of recognized that had hit, it's really about giving people permission to say no and making that normal. Like, one of the first messages that came from even BP Group, and Launchpad, we operate quite separately to BP, but it was family first, right? So giving people the permission to say, hey, I can't do that, not just because I've got a family, but because I've got something else going on right now. Can we do it another time? And so developing that kind of, relationship with one another where you can also challenge and say, am I needed in this meeting? Can I ask you what this meeting is about specifically in a nice way? That, is it something we could cover on a quick 5-minute call before the meeting? Great. So I like to think of it as kind of hacking. So giving people permission to hack the system, to make it work and to optimize their own experience of life, whatever that means, and giving them ideas about like creating buffers at different times of day, baking in a lunch break. I mean, as a people person, I spend my entire day on calls. So, you know, that is my life. You know, other people probably have a bit more time for deep work. I have to literally bake it in like a week in advance if I want to have that. So learning that and just helping to learn from each other, because we were all having to respond to, I think I was doing a panel for London Tech Week, and somebody explained it as we were all in the same storm, but in very different boats. And so I think recognizing that and helping people to figure out how they make their own boat sail effectively.
If I may add, I think from a team perspective, I would, you know, first inside the team, I would hope that the team was able to, you know, to collectively decide how do we want to communicate. You know, is there Zoom fatigue? What can we do about it? What are the things that we can maybe decide through Slack or, you know, different, how do we internally communicate in a way that's more, less tiring for everyone. And then one of the things I've seen as another kind of a bigger problem is the interactions between teams or between one team and people outside the team. So I think for that, what can also help is to have very clear kind of team interface. So we call this team API in the book, where as a team, you are making clear from inside out perspective, how do you prefer other teams or other people outside the team to communicate with you? And especially when a given team has very different kinds of work they have to do. So perhaps they have to do support, but they also do product development and, you know, whatever it is, or they respond to questions from other people, whatever it is, but you can actually provide a very clear interface to your team, and by saying, well, for this type of request, you know, we prefer that you contact us on Slack, or for this urgent matter, please call us or call this person. And, you know, let's use Zoom for this type of, you know, we need to collaborate and discuss something that's really needs face-to-face. So from a team perspective, you can also clarify what are your preferred communication patterns, so that you're not basically kind of shift and lift from the office to remote and saying, well, let's just do on video everything that used to be kind of face-to-face interaction, because that's not going to be sustainable in the long term.
And I think that's the key, Manuel, is that what I saw is that teams that were continually in meetings in face-to-face real life went to continuous Zoom and had the same bad habits repeated, and absolutely all the things you were saying about actually define an API, actually realize, you know, if we have booked an hour for a Zoom or for a meeting face-to-face, we don't have to take it all. We can actually be effective on our agenda and maybe start reducing some of this time and cost that we seem somehow obliged to fill the exact hour. It's like, I can't believe that every conversation takes exactly the amount of time that we booked for it. It's some very odd habit that we've all got into. And so defining your API and being really clear about it and picking the things that really need to be discussed in these new patterns is definitely the key.
I would add two more things that I stole from the internet. So one is the thing that I stole from Ashley McNamara. She is a developer advocate at Microsoft, if I'm not wrong, and she had a talk about burnout. And one of the things that she said was like, as leaders, we should give the example and not reach out to our employees and to our direct reports and to other people outside working hours. So if something can wait until tomorrow and it's 6:30, well, it's actually almost 7 now. So yeah, that can wait to tomorrow. So preserve the personal time. And the other one is, I don't remember who wrote it, but I stole it from Twitter. It's every time that you are in right now we are in a remote first situation, right? In a location agnostic situation, let's call it like this. So I am now in a call with Ruth, Douglas, and Manuel, and well, I am in your home. I have a window into your home. So should a kid pass around and pull your t-shirt, or should some noise happen? I mean, it's your home. So as you said earlier, Ruth, we are in the same store from different boats. It's just a matter of acknowledging that, and it's just a matter of respecting that and be authentic to the early point.
Yeah, it's done a lot for helping people to become more authentic, though. If you're talking about helping people to find their, because people have just simply had to be who they are a lot of the time, and that's the kind of thing that people like me have been trying to get people to do for a really long time.
Yep.
But suddenly, and one of the wonderful things as well is I think parenthood has stopped being such a sort of secret, guilty, like a swear word. It's like, actually, here are my children, here is my family, here is my life. For me, here is my artwork, here is my empty, but whatever, right? Yeah. Like suddenly people are in one another's worlds, and I think that's a beautiful thing. But I'm pro connection, I'm pro togetherness. So yeah, I think it will help us all to evolve.
All right, I am sorry for the other questions, but we are really running out of time. We're really over time. So I will move on to our book club. So before switching off, basically, I would really like to get a final piece of advice for each one of you. So out of the books that you've read in your career or you've written, you choose, what is the book or the books that helped you forming your ideas on this topic on organizational resilience, that you would recommend to the audience? Who wants to start?
I can start. So I actually piled them up here so I can show them. There's one that's specifically about kind of organizational design, but the others are more from what I learned from them that has an impact. So this first one is called Maverick. I realized Zoom is mirroring it, the title, but it's called Maverick from Ricardo Semler. And what this taught me is, like, if you have radical transparency and radical autonomy in an organization, you can achieve amazing things. So this is a real story about how the author became by inheritance became the CEO of a large factory, and how they evolved by giving people the 100% autonomy that you could think of. And so I don't expect many organizations to be as radical as this, but it's super interesting because they were making decisions always based on both what made sense for the people involved, but also for the organization, without kind of any strict hierarchy, without strong objectives defined, and etc. So that's super interesting. The one that is more closely related to organization design is from Naomi Stanford. It's from The Economist Organization Design Guide. She has a number of other books. So what I learned from there, and one of the key things is the need to sense. So I talked about that a few times, of becoming a sensing organization, not just on the world outside and the market, customer, etc., but also internally. And the fact that our kind of traditional command and control approach does not support that well. So it's much more the need for networks of people and teams and this sort of adaptability. I also like, the Lean Startup and essentially all the kind of Lean related books, because that gives you, even for large corporation, that gives you an idea of how can we apply these ideas of being lean, of being responsive to change, reducing waste, etc. So that's also something that those principles apply regardless if you're an actual startup or if you are corporate or you are in a pocket of a corporate organization. And then finally, self-publicity, but I hope team topologies helps to some extent. We mentioned earlier to think at the team level. Why is team the unit that we should be thinking about, and what needs to change for us to promote teams and team autonomy and team performance? Sorry, it was a bit long.
Great. That's good.
I'll make it snappy. I always recommend Solve for Happy by Mo Gawdat because, frankly, a big part of building resilience within yourself is the relationship that you're having with yourself, and the realization that your brain is a misery generating machine is a pretty big one. So when you learn to master your mind and live from the seat of your consciousness, the deep, deep, wise voice within, and you realize that's who you really are and that this is just an organ, everything changes. So that's the book that I often recommend to people because it's super easy to read, and he's a super good human who's out there trying to help people live happier lives. Over.
Cool. So I guess I've got one here live. I highly recommend, if you want the quick summary of everything about resilient organizations, that's the book. It's got huge bibliography. It's well researched. It's by an academic, but who worked a lot in the recovery on the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand, and then did a lot of study on how organizations and communities come back from significant change and in their environment. And it's a brilliant summary of everything we've been talking about. It covers everything that Ruth was talking about, Manuel was talking about, and I was talking about. And then I would, if you kind of want to go more into background kind of stuff, I would highly recommend Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows for your systems thinkers out there who want to understand what leaders create as systems and how they affect the organization around them. Behave by Robert Sapolsky, which is the kind of a core book on how complex humans are and how much psychology and neuropsychology and chemicals and stuff are going around our systems and creating different ways in which we operate and behave. So fantastic if you want to look at some of the science behind the individual and how they could be more resilient. And then finally, Polarity Management. I can't remember the author's name, something Johnson, which is the helping managers and leaders think about, when I have a continuum like resilience to robustness, how do I communicate and think about where I should be on that continuum, and how do I make those choices? And it's a great book. So those would be my 4.
Awesome. I want to contribute as well. If you can see it, this is The Advantage from Patrick Lencioni. It really talks about, it talks about why organizational health trumps everything else in business. Literally, this is written on the cover of the book, right? And it touches on many points that were covered during this panel, from alignment at the leadership level. So without creating, that conflict that tears the organization in multiple pieces. And also it gives you a framework or a mental model to think about the organizational health overall. And I found I could apply that model to improve my own organization. And one of the aspects of this mental model is how quickly the organization can react to failure and can change. And that is like the essence of resilience. Awesome. We are done. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Manuel. I really loved being this long with you today. It's been fantastic and energetic, and you gave me a lot of insight. I would keep going for another day or so, but time is what it is, and we need to stop it here. So also thanks to everybody in the audience for all the relevant questions and all your inputs and interaction with us today. As I said, this was the 4th panel of Building Performing Teams, and I hope you enjoyed. as I did. And the next and last appointment of this series will take place during the Codemotion Tech Conference in a month or so. It's going to be on the 22nd of October. Yeah. And so the conference is structured in 4 tracks. And the 22nd of October, there will be a full day dedicated to effective developers and teams. That's the name of that track. And we're going to be there. I hope to see you there. I thank you again for your attendance, and have a nice rest of the evening. You, everybody. Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.